Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Brain. This is our weekly webinar here at Doman International, where parents with children with special needs join from around the world, and they come with their biggest and most important questions. And it's our absolute pleasure to answer them. I'm joined by Colleen Hudson, who's the Director of Representatives here at Doman International. And wherever you are in the world, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're watching us right now on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, go ahead and type your questions into the comments box and we will get to them in order. I always urge parents, get your questions in early. Sometimes as we're wrapping up, that's when we start to get a flurry of questions and we don't get to answer all of them. So today we have a special topic, which is when do children with special needs need oral integration? So some kind of stimulation inside, outside of the mouth that will help them in their development. So before I get into how we would do oral integration, I'd like to talk about why it's needed and when it's needed. So first of all, some children, because they have underlying sensory issues, because of an injury that's taken place in the brain, or because their brain development hasn't been normal, many children don't feel their bodies well. And sometimes that results in them not being able to feel their mouths well. They may not be able to feel their tongues or their cheeks or their gums, and that can affect them in various ways. So some children have feeding issues, so they don't eat well, they can't swallow well, they can't chew. So children who have feeding issues can often benefit from oral integration. Children who have speech issues, children who don't talk or who have limited speech or have speech articulation issues because they can't control their tongue, those children can also benefit from an oral integration program. Children who also have sensory needs, who are constantly placing things, objects into their mouths, chewing on objects. Some parents will tell me their child has their shirt in their mouth all day long. Those children can also really benefit from oral integration. And then also children who are on the opposite end of the spectrum, children who are hypersensitive. Some parents, can't, brush their children's teeth because the child is so hypersensitive, so defensive around anything, any object being placed in their mouth. So all of those children, speech issues, feeding issues, sensory seeking, hypersensitivity around the mouth, these are children that can benefit from oral integration. I'm sure there are other children I'm not thinking about. I'm thinking also maybe children who drool a lot could benefit, because maybe if they feel their mouths better, they'd be able to control their drooling better. So let's get into how we do oral integration. And in terms of materials, very often it's good to start with a vibrating oral motor tool. And I think I can pull one up on the screen just to give a good example of this. Give me one moment. Colleen, can you see an Amazon page up
Yes,
on the screen?
I see it.
Perfect.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a pretty good oral motor stimulation tool called the Buzz Buddy, which comes in this purple case, and it comes with a bunch of different heads that go on top of the brush, and basically you hit the on button and it makes the head of the brush vibrate. And that can provide some really good deep stimulation, right? The vibration provides a deeper sensory stimulation that helps stimulate the organs of the mouth and the muscles better. And of course, we're doing this, remember, this isn't an exercise for the mouth. We're using sensory stimulation to reach the brain, right? There are chains of neurons that carry information from our skin or from our mouths to the brain. And so we're providing tactile stimulation to improve those pathways carrying information into the brain and to help the child's overall awareness of their mouth. So there are other oral motor tools, like there's one called the Z Vibe, which is also very good, like the letter Z and then the word vibe. But I tend to like the Buzz Buddy, but the Z Vibe also works well. Okay, so there's nothing magical about these. They really do the job well. Okay, they're easy to clean, and they've been used by thousands and thousands of parents around the world with success. So that is the first thing, right? You're going to need your tools, and then the second part of this is, okay, how do you do a session? So I'd like to show you what a session looks like. Now, of course, when you receive these tools, they come with instructions, for example, on how to sterilize them, with soap and water. And, please make sure to always follow those recommendations. One of the reasons why we actually, for a while, didn't do a lot of oral integration was the concern of introducing illnesses to the child, right? Whenever you place anything in and around the mouth, you're increasing the possibility of illness. It's an easy way for the child to be introduced to bacteria or viruses. So you have to make sure, every day when you're using a brush like that, that you're sterilizing it, you're making it clean, so that it's completely safe. All right, let me show you what a session would look like with a vibrating tool like the one I showed you. All right, Colleen, do you see a slide in front of you with a girl with the mom holding a brush?
Yes, I do.
All right, perfect. Just let me see if I can make this a little bigger. All right, do you see the video playing now?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. All right. So let me just describe what we're seeing here, right? So the mom is using the vibrating brush, okay? And this girl is about 5 years old in this video. And you can see that mom is doing some stimulation on the inside of the cheeks, okay? There are some very important nerves that run through our cheeks that help us control our mouth muscles, okay? So by stimulating the inside of the cheek, you're stimulating those nerves, right? Which is very important to get the brain to better sense the mouth. Okay. Now you're seeing mom do some oral integration under the lips. Okay. The lips are obviously very important for producing certain kinds of sounds, right? Like for you to produce a sound like B or M, you have to be able to feel your lips well and do those lip closure sounds, right? Like M. And so we're stimulating the lips here just to get the child better feeling. And that can help with sound production. This girl, by the way, when this video was taken, had been doing oral integration for several months. So, you can see she's pretty calm. She's pretty used to it, right? For some children, their first sessions are not going to be this long, right? It might just be 10 seconds, 15 seconds, just to get them used to it. And over time, we build up their tolerance. All right. Now mom is stimulating the palate, right? So we're doing the roof of the mouth here. And then here you can see stimulation of the tongue. The tongue is so important, right, for feeding, to be able to move food around inside of our mouths, but also for the production of sounds, right? So, for example, you could see the mom there was stimulating the roof of the mouth, then stimulating the tongue. Being able to feel your tongue and make specific movements with it, very important for the production of certain sounds. So if you think about certain sounds like the T sound, right? It requires you to put your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. or the L sound, right? So in order to be able to do these things, to control your tongue, move it to the top of the mouth, you have to be able to feel your tongue and feel the roof of your mouth. And so that's one of the reasons why you can see the mom doing the stimulation, roof of the mouth and tongue. So generally a session would be about, a minute and a half inside of the mouth. Okay. That girl was pretty cooperative. That video might have even been maybe 2 minutes long. But again, when you're starting with a child, you might just start with a 10 or 15-second session, because the last thing we want to do is upset the child a lot in the first sessions, and the child then starts resisting the program in general. The other thing I would recommend, you saw mom go through different activities: the inside of the cheek, the inside of the lips, the gums, right? And then she moved, to the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Very often when we start with a child, I wouldn't do the tongue in the first session, for example, because many children, first of all, some children will bite down, reflexively when you go to stimulate the tongue. So it's often better to start with things on the outside of the teeth. So doing the gums, doing the inside of the cheeks, doing the inside of the lips. For most children, first of all, they might have already had some of that stimulation already with a toothbrush, so they might be used to it. And they're able to adapt to that easier. And then when your child is more comfortable and trusting, then you can begin the process of stimulating and the tongue or the roof of the mouth. Okay, so okay, we got a quick question here, which is probably worth us taking on right now. Does every baby need oral stimulation, or is there no benefit if there's no particular issue? That's a good question. So generally, if we're just talking about neurotypical well children, I wouldn't generally recommend oral integration. Obviously, when we brush a child's teeth, that's a form of oral, integration. We may not be doing it for that reason, but it is. But yeah, for a neurotypical child, no, I wouldn't generally recommend it. Just because there are other things that we could do with that child that I think would prove a better use of time, like a reading program or a math program or an encyclopedic knowledge program, or the physical parts of the Doman method, about developing balance and getting that child walking as soon as possible. So when we talk about oral stimulation, we're talking about it more for children, as I said at the very beginning, with feeding issues, sensory issues, speech issues.
May I ask, Spencer? So,
Yeah, please.
because this mom is coming to see us in July with her little guy, an infant, in Folia, and he has a diagnosis of Down syndrome. So, is it right? A lot of times I think about, for families who are finding the Doman method when their children are infants, so much of what we recommend can help head off issues before they become big issues. So
Absolutely.
hopefully he'll just never have a feed, issues with, or like needing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for sure, maybe one way of answering this is like if I had a baby born tomorrow with Down syndrome, I would do a lot of sensory stimulation from the outset, even if I wasn't 100% sure if they needed it, because there's really nothing to lose and there's a lot to gain. And when we look at the vast majority of children, for example, with Down syndrome, it's very common for them to have feeding issues. Speech development tends to be one of their biggest challenges. And so, yeah, I would start oral integration early with the hopes of reducing those symptoms or even possibly preventing them entirely. So yeah, thank you for giving me that information, because that's helpful.
She's followed up too. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So my baby has Down syndrome, but is breastfed and really comfortable with food. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, it could be helpful with feeding in the future, things like chewing, but also it can be very helpful. Oral integration can be helpful with speech articulation, right? Which, again, for virtually, I don't know the exact percentage, but I can say with relative confidence that 90 to 95% of the children that we see with any kind of neurodevelopmental issue have some sort of speech issue when they begin the program. For some children, that might be very mild, mild articulation issues or challenges with structuring speech. And for some children, it's severe or profound, where some children even start our program and they are nonverbal, they don't speak. Just to give everyone an idea, at our clinic in New Zealand, I saw a 15-year-old girl who was returning for her second visit. So she started our program at 15, and she started in her speech level as having no consistent words of speech. And we just reevaluated her 6 months later. And, now she has 5 words. At 15 years, she said her first words in her life. And for that, obviously for that, teenager, we're doing more than just, oral integration. We're doing, a respiratory program to help her breathing. We're doing certain cognitive programs to promote speech development. So it is a holistic approach, but oral integration plays a big role in that. And so I would recommend it in your case. All right. Let's see. Oh, so Jane says here, what exercises can improve oral motor strength and endurance to help with speech production or reduce excessive drooling? So, good question. So, when we talk about reducing excessive drooling, oral integration can help with that. When it comes to, but I would also say that some of the Doman Method oxygenation programs that involve improving things like lung capacity and breathing regulation can also help reduce drooling. Very often, children that drool very often have issues with oral motor strength. You mentioned that, but they also tend to have respiratory issues, right? And that leads to them sometimes breathing through their mouths, and that leads to the drooling, right? If we all walked around with our mouths open throughout the day, you would also find yourself either drooling or kind of having to fight back that all the time, right? And so, yeah, so for those children, we definitely do oral integration, but we also have that Doman Method oxygenation program that helps improve breathing regulation. And often we see children keep their they're able to keep their mouths closed for longer periods of the day, and they're able to control their saliva production. So yeah, those are kind of the two main things that I can think of. We do, Jane, when a child is on our program, we have certain foundational programs that we would begin with. So like the oxygenation program and oral integration are, two programs that are very common for us to start when children come to our clinic for the first time. We do have more advanced oral motor activities that we do to help strengthen, I was going to say strengthen the jaw, but it's not really to strengthen the jaw. It's to strengthen the connection between the brain and the muscles that control the jaw. But we usually want to get started with these foundational programs first to make sure the child has all the underlying sensory and respiratory abilities that they need to produce speech and control drooling. Good question. All right. Annabella is asking, hi, we are the family of Vanessa. Yes, we know you, Annabella. And we are using the vibration at home. Since she is tolerating it well and seems to seek stronger input, would it be appropriate to gradually increase the intensity? I just want to make sure we're not overstimulating her. So Annabella, when you say increase the intensity, do you mean increase the duration of the session, like make the session longer? Because usually when we talk about increasing intensity, we're talking about the strength. So, for example, if there was a vibrating brush that had different settings, and there are some that have that, increasing the strength would be increasing the intensity. Now, to answer your question in a general way, yes, it's perfectly fine. If a child is tolerating and even enjoying something, it's perfectly fine to start to increase the duration of the session or the intensity. My only piece of advice is don't increase both at the same time, because if you increase both the intensity and the duration, and then Vanessa starts to resist something, you don't know, was it because you increased the intensity or the duration, because you made two changes at the same time. In general, this is just a side comment. When we're looking at children with special needs, it's very important that we only make one change at a time, right? Because when you make multiple changes, it's hard for you to be able to track, first of all, what is getting good results, but it's also harder to track if there's some kind of negative response to something. So I would just make one change, but absolutely you can increase it if needed. All right, we've got a question here on Facebook from Shantine. I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Shantine.
Shantine. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We're in touch.
You're in touch. Okay.
Yeah.
Shantine. All right. So the question from Shantine is, so this obviously counts for a kid with a feeding tube and a trach with no feeds or fluids going into the mouth. Does this then eventually go hand in hand with oral feeding in the future when following the Doman method? Yes. So so oral integration would be an important part of any program that we're going to do where we want to reintroduce oral feeding with a child. It's not the only thing we're going to do, but it's going to be a big part of it. You heard me reference before about the respiratory aspect of things and how we have certain respiratory programs that help breathing. Regulating your breathing is essential for feeding. Most of us who have normal breathing never have to worry about this. But, imagine when you take a bite of food and you've got it in your mouth and you're chewing it, you're able to chew that food for a while and you continue breathing through your nose as you're chewing that food in your mouth. And we do this every day without thinking anything about it. But for a child who's unable to regulate their breathing or who has shallow breathing, having food in their mouth can be a frightening experience. It can kind of feel like drowning to them, right? Because they've got food, they feel rushed because they can't breathe, right? And my grandfather, Glenn Doman, always used to say, if a person has to make a choice between breathing and doing anything else, they're always going to choose breathing, right? Because we need to breathe to survive. And so very often children with feeding issues have breathing problems. And so if we help resolve the underlying breathing issue, their oral feeding becomes much, much better. So Shantine, for your child, we would do both things. And by the way, if you're wondering it, we do have many children who have been on our program with a trach who also do our oxygenation program. Our respiratory team knows how to modify our respiratory program specifically for children with trachs. So it is a relatively common issue that we see. And so we can help your child's respiration and oral feeding in the future. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Oh yeah, Annabelle is just clarifying here. She was talking about the intensity of the vibrating device. Absolutely. Yeah, you can give it a try. And as long as she's comfortable with it, continue on. All right. We've got another question here. My child attends elementary school and is 6.5 years old. What strategies can be implemented in the school setting to help my child manage oral, tactile, and proprioceptive needs while focusing on tasks? And then I'll also just follow up here. with Jane's next message. The oral integration program has been life-changing. When I started, he could not tolerate any stimulation in the mouth, meaning not even 5 seconds. Now he can with ease and calmness. It makes it not scary to my child. Wow, that is wonderful. So returning to your first question, Jane, about what could be done from a sensory standpoint in school, my first thought is it actually depends a lot on what the teachers and potentially aides in the school are willing to do. Because this is something which varies greatly, right, in different schools with different families around the world. Some schools and professionals are much more willing to, they're much more open-minded than in other places. So again, I'll just go back, just because we did clinics in New Zealand, we had probably a half a dozen families that came for their appointments, and a teacher's aide came and attended the appointment with them voluntarily. Just said, yeah, I'll come to your child's Doman appointment and learn about the Doman programs, because I'd love to know what the child is doing at home and know what I can implement at school. So, and obviously it's a win-win-win situation for everyone when that happens. That being said, that has not been the norm for children on our program around the world. That's been more of a lucky situation. I think that attitudes are slowly changing, but still there are many professionals who just don't want to hear it. They're not interested in learning a new way of doing things. So if the professionals around your child in the school are willing to learn about things like tactile integration, like the Doman tactile program or the cognitive programs, and are willing to implement it at school, that could be done. Now, there are certain programs I wouldn't delegate to others. So for example, the oral integration program, just for hygienic reasons, I wouldn't send the oral stimulation tool to school with my child and say, hey, do a couple sessions. I wouldn't. It's just not worth it. So many illnesses are already picked up in school settings. So I wouldn't do that. Definitely the Doman Method oxygenation program, I wouldn't delegate away for safety reasons. But things like the cognitive programs, reading, tactile stimulation, where really there's no potential of an error being harmful, it could be done. You just have to make sure they're the right person. And when I say the right person, sometimes people will say, how do you know if someone could be helpful with doing the Doman method? Actually, this is a kind of good side topic. Like, how do I know if someone outside of my family could be helpful with doing the Doman method? I usually say, okay, the person needs to have 3 qualities. And it's important to note here, it's not so much about their what degrees they have, right? It has much more to do with the characteristics of the individual. So what I always say to parents is, number one, do they respect your child's innate intelligence? Do they know this child is bright? They're able to understand. Do they speak to the child in a respectful way, right? So do they respect your child's innate intelligence? So that's kind of number one criteria. Number 2, are they a good coach, right? So could they motivate your child to do something which is a little challenging, right? Because even with the Doman Method reading program or math program or tactile integration program, you have to be able to know how to interact with the child and coach them to do something. That requires a person with a specific skill set to be able to coach. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone knows how to motivate a child or how to interact with them properly. So that's the second thing. So as I said, number 1, they have to respect your child's innate intelligence. Number 2, they have to be a good coach. And then number 3, they have to actually listen to you as the parent, right? And they have to be able to say, okay, they know their child better than anyone else, so they're recommending me to do this, so I'm going to help with that. And some professionals just cannot get beyond them thinking they're the world's leading expert in the child when they just aren't, and they're not willing to listen to parents, and sometimes I sit across from a family and I'll tell them, hey, I'm recommending this treatment for your child, and I'll tell them why we're doing it. And once in a while, it doesn't happen often, but once in a while, a family will say, we're just not comfortable doing that, one of the activities that I teach. And even when they've heard my reason why and the history about why we use it, they're still not comfortable with it. And we say, fine, you're not comfortable with it. Let's move on, right? No use in wasting time in doing something that you're not comfortable doing, because in the end, it's about at Doman International, we have a value, right? Which is that we trust parents to make decisions for their children. And at times that means that we may want to do something and the parent isn't ready for it or wanting to do it. And that's fine. We can put it away. And there are plenty other, in our case, there are 400 other, activities we could do with the child that would be beneficial for the child's development. So if you come across a professional who's not willing to listen to you, at that point, it's better not to try to convince them of whatever it is. So hopefully those, if you find someone at your child's school that have those three criteria, right, those three characteristics, yeah, they could be helpful with doing some of the activities, but they've got to be the right person. All right, let's see. We've got other questions here. Virginia says, hello, Spencer and Colleen, nice to see you. My little baby is tiptoeing sometimes. What might be the reason and how do we stop it? So in my experience, Virginia, when children tiptoe walk, they usually do it for one of two reasons. Some children do it because they have an overactive Babinski reflex. So the Babinski reflex is a reflex on the feet where if you stimulate the bottom of the foot, the toes go up, right? So you'll recognize the Babinski because you take the child's foot. Imagine this is the foot. You brush, you take your thumb like this and you kind of push into your child's foot. And if you see the toes pop up and out, they have a Babinski. And if the toes go down, that's a normal reaction, okay? But if a child has that immature Babinski, sometimes they walk and their foot keeps touching the ground and it keeps stimulating the reflex. And so they walk on their toes. And then other children have hypersensitive feet. So that could be another potential reason. So I would recommend, first of all, doing a lot of tactile stimulation on the feet and on the bottoms of the feet, because if there is tactile hypersensitivity there, that could be helpful. And then from a Babinski reflex standpoint, the reason why children retain a Babinski reflex is usually because their cortex, which is the highest level of the brain, isn't fully developed yet. And so any program that can help the cortex develop can help reduce that reflex. So, Virginia, just to give you some thoughts, for things that you might have learned about in the books, the walking and running program can be helpful for developing the cortex. The reading and math programs can be helpful for developing the cortex. The cortex is the part of the brain that really differentiates humans from other animals, right? So everything we can do that other animals can't do is because of the cortex. We can read, we can write, we can talk, we can do mathematics, we have high-level executive function. That's all the cortex. So anything that can stimulate the cortex can be helpful for reducing that Babinski reflex. Colleen, do you know, has Virginia watched the online the Doman Method course, the online course?
Virginia has access to it. I'm not sure how far, you've had a chance to get.
Yeah, because Virginia, in that course, and by the way, for anyone who doesn't know about it, when families come to our clinic for an appointment, we give them access to an online course that they can watch in advance, which is called the Doman Method course, where we outline the foundations of our program, and it's really helpful for parents to prepare for their upcoming appointment and learn about our program. And very often parents will watch those videos and begin the program at home before coming for an appointment. So Virginia, I just mentioned the course because we talk a bit about the Babinski reflex in the course, as well as some of the various programs that can be helpful as well. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to check Instagram for a second, see if we have any questions here. No questions on Instagram. Okay. Virginia asks, how can I use alphabets, which my son cuts and shades each day? I mean, more creative ways apart from making words. Is it all right, or should I stop him? He has been so addicted to them. All right, Virginia, if I understand your question correctly, I get the sense your child kind of plays with letters throughout the day and is kind of addicted to playing with them. Let me know if I understood that correctly. There are certain children that are obsessed with doing the same behaviors over and over again. Like they want to put things in a sequence or in an order. So like putting the letters like A, B, C, D, and they just want to do that over and over and over again to a point where it's not really healthy, right? It's kind of, an obsessive behavior. Virginia, one thing you could consider, which would take his interest, but kind of channel it into something which is productive for him and helpful, would be to take a word that he's learned in the Doman reading program. So let's see, I've got some Doman materials here. Let me see, let me pull some out here. So let's say he has learned the word bear. Okay. So what you could start to do is you put the word bear down on a tabletop, right? And then you'd give him the letters for this word. So the letters for B, E, A, and R. Okay. And you could just start by putting the word in front of him and showing him how to put the letters into order to create the word. Okay. So you're using the same alphabets that he's kind of playing with obsessively, but now you're using them for a useful skill, which is spelling, right? So you begin by just showing him how to do it properly, and you let him copy the word by doing B-E-A-R. Now, one important thing, sometimes children who are neurologically disorganized, when they put the letters in order, they don't go left to right. So, for example, they'll put the A, and then they'll put the B, and then they put the E, and then the R, kind of like they're doing a puzzle, but they're not doing it from left to right. It's a symptom of their neurodevelopmental issue. So it's very important that you start to teach him, no, we're always going to put them in order. So we're going to do the B first, then the E, then the A, then the R. Now, when he can consistently do this word on his own by spelling it, he doesn't need your help. Then what you can start to do is you say, all right, now let's flip over the card so you can't see it. Here are the letters, the 4 letters. Can you spell bear on your own? So he goes ahead and he can put the letters into order. Now, even if he makes a mistake, it's fine, okay? But don't tell him if he's made a mistake, right? Because if you say you misspelled bear, he may not like that. He might get defensive. So after he's spelled it, you say, all right, here's the word. Now, make any corrections. So he gets to look at the word, and if he made any mistakes, he can correct it. That's good because he learns from his mistakes if he corrects himself. And also he doesn't have to feel self-conscious that someone else is correcting him. So I would recommend giving that a try, Virginia, because again, it's a productive skill. And this is actually one of the first things we do with a child before teaching them how to write or type. So you're actually beginning the process of writing or typing with him by helping him create words on his own. And hopefully he'll start to see like, oh, this is something productive I can do with the letters. I don't have to engage in these kind of repetitive behaviors anymore. All right, good question. We've got a question here from Caitlin. Caitlin says, hello, my 13-year-old son has significant mood swings. He'll be happy one moment, and then something small makes him terribly upset. Is there anything you can recommend to help him to help regulate children with these kinds of mood issues? He is nonverbal with a history of perinatal stroke, ASD, and epilepsy. Yeah. So a couple of thoughts, Caitlin. So first of all, his mood swings might be related, first of all, to his lack of speech development and the frustration that he's having with being unable to communicate his thoughts and ideas. And so the first thing is there could be a speech issue, but there's also likely a dysregulation of something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is it's the longest cranial nerve that we have, and it is essential for regulating our emotions. The vagus nerve controls something called the fight or flight response, which is the human fear response. When we're fearful, we tend to either fight or flight, fight meaning push back, flight meaning run away. And so when he has a mood swing, it could also be because of dysregulation of the vagus nerve, right? He's getting very upset because he can't regulate his feelings. And we have programs both for the communication challenge that you've mentioned, and also the vagus nerve dysregulation that I just mentioned. Now, Colleen, have you spoken at all to Caitlin?
I actually just sent her an email with a video that you made for her.
Got it. Yeah.
So so now we'll be in touch.
Yeah, because when I saw the 3 diagnoses, I was like, okay, I think I've heard from this parent before. So yeah, Caitlin, what we would do with a child like your son is, from the vagus nerve perspective, there are certain programs that we use to stimulate the vagus nerve and that help with emotional regulation. So there's a program, for example, called the Safe and Sound Protocol. It's a music protocol, which the music has been specially formulated to stimulate the vagus nerve through the auditory pathway. Interestingly, the vagus nerve runs through our inner ear muscles. So very often children who have dysregulated vagus nerves also tend to be, they could be hypersensitive to sounds. They can have difficulty focusing on speech when people are speaking to them. The Safe and Sound Protocol probably would be very helpful for your child. And, all of these things that I'm going to mention are part of a holistic program, right? It's not just one thing, it's not like one silver bullet that's going to resolve all of these issues, but by taking a holistic approach, we can help him with communicating better, we can help the vagus nerve function better, and that will help him in many, many ways. From a communication standpoint, certainly we want to get him speaking as soon as possible. I'm not sure if you heard, I mentioned there was a 15-year-old that we saw last week in New Zealand who started to speak her first words. So it's definitely possible. From a communication standpoint, we usually do 2 things kind of side by side. The first is a speech enhancement program. So these are techniques that are specifically focused on improving or starting speech development. But at the same time, we like to use certain communication programs like the choice board to help with communication. Now here, Caitlin, this is where going to the Doman books can be helpful, because a bunch of the things I've just mentioned are in the Doman books. So for example, and Caitlin, if you're, I see that you say, yeah, your son is happy listening to music. Oh yeah, so he'll like the Safe and Sound Protocol. If we take the Answering Autism book, for example, Caitlin, in chapter 8, it's called Your Child's Communication and Speech Development. So it's page 146 of this book. There are different communication programs that are recommended. One is called the Choice Board, which is a communication program for children with limited or no speech. Sorry, I'm just trying to, so it's all about how do you use certain boards at home with written words to begin the process of communicating with a child with limited speech. But then there are also speech development activities in this chapter that would come highly, highly recommended for your son. So I would recommend you give the the book a read. And by the way, if you don't have the Answering Autism book, if you have the Doman Method book, the same information is available in this book. So even if you only have one of the books, you're fine. You'll have the information you need. And then the other recommendation I would give Caitlin is to jump on a call with Colleen, because she can also, first of all, give you access to other online resources that we have. Just to give you an example, I mentioned the choice board, which is in the book, but in our online videos, there's a video of how to use the choice board, right? So Colleen could help you with giving you access to the online course that has that video and other recommendations. And then, Colleen can just talk to you about our program in a more kind of general, holistic way. Colleen, anything you want to add to that?
Just that you should have the email now from me so we can be in contact directly. I'm sorry I didn't have your phone number. I would have probably called prior to now, but yeah, let's be in touch. There's a lot that we can do for sure.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and Caitlin, just to let you know, you can, I see you're actually in StreamYard with us. You're not on social media. So if you want, you might even see a private chat button, or you may not, I'm not sure. But if you see a private chat button, you could put your number in there. Or if you wanted, if you put it in the comments, Colleen can just write it down and then we can delete it. There are very few people in the actual StreamYard chat who would actually see it, if you're comfortable with that. Okay. We've got another question here from Chantenay. Did I say it correctly, Colleen? Thank you. All right. So she says, on the course, you mentioned we as parents are supposed to evaluate our child, like vision, hearing, etc. But it's very difficult doing this and some others when your child does not really react to anything. For instance, my voice doesn't make him excited. He doesn't look at toys or anything for that matter. But with the light reflex, we did. His pupils did perfectly what you said on the course. Sometimes it's hard to know, what does he see or hear or understand? And then your question seems to be cut off after that. I see, do we just, and then, so anyway, Sean, today, if you're welcome to give me more information. But yeah, just a couple of thoughts here. You're absolutely right that certain children are more challenging to evaluate. And it's very important with our developmental profile, when you do that first evaluation, that we are conservative with the evaluation. So it means if you're really not sure if your child can do it, if your child's not giving you a response, better to not give the child credit. And what we're going to do with your child is a lot of intensive sensory stimulation. Because when you have a child who is really not responsive to the environment, usually the best, like you said, the one thing you said, I know he has it, is the light reflex. And for everyone who's watching this that doesn't know, the light reflex is the first visual thing that we evaluate at Doman International, which is we take a flashlight, we direct it at the child's eyes, we watch the pupils, and we see, do the pupils constrict to light? It's the most basic visual ability that we all have. And for some bizarre reason, almost never checked in children with special needs around the world. And the interesting thing is that because we know what to evaluate with children, it then becomes a lot clearer for us to know what we need to stimulate. So in the case of your child, if the only thing we know is that your child has a light reflex, that's the only visual thing we can be confident about, we need to stimulate the light reflex. Because on our developmental profile, we know if we stimulate that first level, which is the light reflex many, many times, it's going to help push the child up to the next level. In this case, in vision, it's perceiving outlines, like being able to see the outlines of people and objects. And so in many ways, Sean, today you kind of answered the question for me, which is you want to stimulate, that area that your child, that your child is at. Okay. And of course, when you come to Doman International in the future, our staff will always evaluate your child. It's the first thing that we do. We evaluate the child using the developmental profile. And don't be hard on yourself. Just to give you an idea, it usually takes us about 9 months to fully train a staff member as an evaluator. So it's not an easy thing to do. But it sounds to me actually like you've done a very, very good job.
And Shantane mentions here they're in South Africa, so most likely we'll have a remote appointment. And we had talked about how that works,
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of experience, Shantane, with evaluating children online. And basically what will happen is our staff will talk you through different activities to do on a video conference in front of them, and they'll be able to watch your child's reaction and gauge it. And we've gotten really, really good at doing it remotely at this point. All right. All very good questions today. We've got a couple minutes left. Colleen, we didn't get any pre-submitted questions, did we?
Not for this week.
Okay, got it.
This week, and I think the ones that I hadn't addressed last week or the week before when you were here, we made videos for. So Caitlin was one of them. Got it.
Yeah. All right, perfect. I see a question here from Ben Herniak on Instagram. It says, Spencer, I need to leave the live, but if you could send me information about the reading program by email, I would appreciate it. And then gives me the email address. Okay. Anything specific about the reading program that you're interested in? Because the reading program is really robust. There are many different parts to the Doman reading program, starting with single words. Then we go to couplets and sentences and homemade books. So there's a whole pathway to go from teaching a child how to read words to books. So if you could give me a bit more information on what you're looking for, that would be really, really helpful. All right. Let's see.
Spencer, if you'd like to, because I don't see that comment, if you'd like to send me his email address, and then we can. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll send it to you in the private chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, Virginia. That's very kind. It's my pleasure. Caitlin is saying he does use a touch chat AAC device to some degree. Okay. So AAC devices for some children work great, but for many children, they don't. And they're quite limited in their scope for communication because very often, I think for two major reasons. First of all, a lot of the AAC devices have very limited options of what the child can choose, and they tend to be things that are quite kind of mundane daily things. So it'll kind of say, okay, you can pick from, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want cookies? Do you want to watch TV? And you'll see buttons, TV, cookies, something like that. And I'm not saying that that isn't valuable in some way, but the issue is that very often to fulfill our deeper human need for communication, we want to communicate more than just, I want to go for a walk or I want to eat cookies, right? Now, again, I'm not belittling those things. Those are important too. But very often we want to talk about our feelings, our thoughts. and the AAC devices can be very limited. And then the second issue is that many children, when they are asked to answer independently on AAC devices, meaning they're asked to point and make choices on their own, sometimes they're overwhelmed visually by the options. Sometimes they don't have the fine motor skills to make choices. And so many children do better when they're given some hand under hand support. So with our choice board program, whenever we start, we begin by giving the child support. And then eventually we might reduce that support and even take it away. But in the beginning, we always give support because we find it helps organize the children. From a neurological perspective, they're far more likely to deliver an answer and give a relevant answer when they're supported. With the choice board, because we can also, for example, we use an erasable whiteboard where we can write different options, we can be far more flexible in the kinds of questions we ask children. While the AAC device is kind of limited and says, hey, kid, pick from these things, we could ask the child, any questions about how they feel about something. We could say, hey, like just to give you an example, a child was at our clinic last week, and we asked her, of the staff you've met so far, who have you enjoyed seeing the most? And they gave an answer, right? That's the kind of question. You couldn't do that on an AAC device. But when that girl answered the question and her family said, oh, wow, Jordan, you like Jordan the most. Okay. The girl lit up, right? And it was like, she finally got to tell her family something about the way she feels, which for someone who's been struggling with being with limited speech for so long, she can kind of show her family who she is. And, that's far deeper than, I want cookies. So that's kind of what we're looking for with the choice board. We get flexibility, but we can also get sophistication, which is why, especially for a 13-year-old, I think it could be very, very valuable, along with giving some under the hand support. And the choice board is something that with virtually every child at a first visit, if they have limited speech, when they come for their first visit at our clinic, our staff will do it with them, to get experience with the child and then teach the parents how to do it. Okay. I think, Colleen, we've gone through all the questions, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great questions today. Really,
questions, yeah.
Really good session. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Colleen, thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure. As always.
And everyone, thanks so much. We'll be back next week, same time, as always.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye, everyone.
See you, people. Thanks.